It's a bit of an unusual gospel for what we might imagine to celebrate Christ the King. When we think about Christ enthroned, Christ the King, I think the first thing that probably jumps to mind is an image of Jesus seated on a throne in heaven, perhaps at the right hand of the Father. Clouds and light beams shining through, and trumpet blasts, and glory everywhere, and angels filling the sky. That it just seems like that would be more appropriate to celebrate Christ the King. And yet the church gives us this gospel today, the gospel of Christ crucified on the cross. And I think we see this image in stark contrast to what the world would understand true power and glory to be. That there is a worldly feeling, I guess, that says true power is to make yourself big. True power is to dominate another, to be stronger than another. True power is to get your way, to have influence. And true glory is to have wealth and riches and fame and fortune and everybody speaking well of you. That's what it seems like. That's what the world tells us. But Jesus offers another example today. His throne is not a throne of gold. His throne is the cross. The wood of the cross becomes his throne in the midst of the world. And as he is lifted up on that cross, he is not lifted up in people's hearts. They're not shouting out glories to him, but rather just the opposite. They're jeering him. They're taunting him. And in fact, they're tempting him. St. Luke's gospel, if you recall, begins after Jesus' baptism. He moves into the desert. And when he goes into the desert, the devil comes to tempt him 3 times. And those temptations are temptations of power. If you are the Son of God, then change those rocks. If you are the Son of God, then throw yourself down. If you're the Son of God, show your power. Use your might and your strength. Rule the whole wide world if you are the Son of God. But if you're not, well then, I guess you'll just do these human things. So there is this temptation, perhaps, that Jesus struggled with throughout his life. Because Jesus, we know, though he never sinned, experienced temptation. That's why that account is given to us at the very beginning. And perhaps the temptation he experienced is how to be the all-powerful, mighty, strong, creative God in human form, in a human body, among other human beings. What does that look like? And again, the temptation would be to be mighty and strong and big and powerful. But Jesus resists that temptation all throughout his life, choosing to be born in poverty, choosing to be known as the son of a craftsman, a carpenter, and then losing almost all of his disciples here at the cross. Because when folks looked at him lifted high on the cross, they didn't see what looked like a Messiah. They didn't see a king. Rather, they saw a condemned criminal, guilty of treason. That was the inscription above his head. This is the King of the Jews, and we have but one king, and he is in Rome, the emperor. And so that was the pretext for his crucifixion. So anybody walking by who didn't know this guy, who didn't follow him or listen to him or have a relationship with him, they would look at that cross and say, that's not the prophet. That's not a Messiah. That's not a king. That's a criminal. And so in Luke's temptation account, it says, the evil one tempted Jesus 3 times and then departed from him for a time. Well, we see him return now at the cross. The evil one fills the hearts of people standing around him, and the same 3 temptations are lifted up to Jesus. If you are the Son of God, if you are the Messiah, if you are the King, show your power. Don't show your weakness. Show your power. Show your strength. Save yourself and all of us, and then everybody will know you're the Messiah, and you won't have lost, but you're going to lose. The same temptations, the evil one returns. And yet Jesus resists, because Jesus knows that true power is not shown in strength and in bigness, but true power is shown by conquering the spirit within. That we become strong when we are able to master the temptations in our lives, when we are able to have power and control over our own soul and our own spirit. That's where true strength is. It takes no strength at all to lash out at someone in anger, to utter a curse word, to act in jealousy or greed. It takes no strength to do those things. It takes strength to tame that anger, to bite your lip, to say a kind word when you would rather turn your back or utter some profanity. It takes a lot more strength to do good things, to act in virtue, than it does to act in vice. And so this is what Christ's kingship, I think, today for us means. Christ's kingship is a kingship where power isn't demonstrated in external strength, but rather power is demonstrated in great love. It is the passion of the cross, that great pouring out of love that demonstrates Jesus' strength, and that's what makes him king. You and I then are baptized and confirmed, sealed with that Spirit that anointed Christ. And so you and I are called to be priest, prophet, and king with him. And that doesn't mean we are called to conquer the world in some external show or in political power and influence, but rather we are to conquer the world by conquering hearts. Jesus won for himself on that cross the soul that was crucified next to him, because he conquered that man's heart. He looked at Jesus in faith and recognized his God. We know there will be a centurion standing at the base of the cross who watches Jesus die and says, "Truly, this was the Son of God." Faith was awakened in his heart, and he was saved by that weakness that Jesus showed. If we want to conquer hearts, if we want to win people to the faith, it's not going to be won by strength of argument. It's not going to be won by persuasiveness. It's going to be won by a life of charity, a life that demonstrates true love. When people see the love in you, that conquers the heart. That turns people over. Because the cross forever looks like a failure. Even today, that cross still doesn't look like God. It doesn't look like anything victorious. But as people of faith, we lift it up. We glorify it. We now say something different about it. And that's what our lives must be. If I have been conquered by Christ, how does my life look different? Do I glorify God in my life, in my anointing, conquering those temptations within, and living that kingship rightly? This feast of Christ the King, then, reminds us that kingship comes in humility. Kingship's true strength is shown not out here, but in here. And as each and every one of us recommit ourselves to our baptism and our confirmation, we find that Christ who is King reigning within us, and we will find the kingdom of heaven and what true strength really is.